Come closer, child. Sit down. No, not there. Here, near me. I want you to hear every word of this, because what I am about to tell you, I have never told anyone in full. Not your grandmother, God rest her soul, not your father, not a single living person who still walks this earth beside me. It was the autumn of 1971. I was 23 years old, young, foolish, full of that particular kind of confidence that only the young and the stupid carry around like a lantern in a coal mine. I was living in a small apartment near the university in Columbus, Ohio, studying literature of all things, reading about monsters in books while one was already breathing down the neck of everything I loved. His name was Daniel Hooper. Danny, we called him. He was my closest friend since the age of 9. We had grown up 2 houses apart on the same street in rural Pennsylvania, played together, fought together, shared everything 2 boys could share growing up in a town where nothing ever happened and nothing was ever supposed to. Danny was brilliant. I mean that seriously. Not the kind of brilliant that makes men arrogant, but the quiet kind, the kind that makes a person seem like they are always listening to something you cannot hear. He read philosophy, wrote long letters by hand, laughed easily. He had this way of looking at you like you were the most interesting thing in any room. We came to Columbus together, shared that first terrible apartment with the broken radiator and the landlord who never answered his phone. We were inseparable, and that autumn, everything seemed exactly as it should have been. Until October. It started so small that I am almost ashamed to say it frightened me. Almost. The first thing I noticed was the silence. Danny had always been a talker, a laugher, the kind of man who filled every room with something warm. But one evening in early October, I came home and he was sitting at the kitchen table, just sitting. No book, no coffee, no music on the radio, just sitting with his hands flat on the table, staring at nothing. I said his name. He did not look up. I said it again, and this time, slowly, he turned his head toward me, and the look on his face was not Danny's look. It was empty in a way I had never seen a living face be empty. I told myself he was tired. I told myself it was the coursework, the pressure, maybe a bad phone call from home. I made dinner. We ate in quiet, and by the next morning he was laughing again like nothing had happened, so I let it go. That was my first mistake. By the second week of October, the episodes were coming more frequently, and they were lasting longer. I would find Danny standing in the hallway at 2 in the morning, facing the wall, perfectly still. I would call his name, and he would turn around with this slow, mechanical movement, like something winding itself back into place, and smile at me. But the smile never touched his eyes. It was a performance, and whatever was performing it had not yet learned all the details of Danny's face. I mentioned it to our friend Carl Bremer. He lived 2 floors above us. He laughed and said Danny was probably sleepwalking, probably stressed. Carl was a practical man, an engineering student, the kind of person who needed every door to have a handle he could turn. He did not like questions that had no answers. But I watched. I kept watching, because something in me, something older than reason, something that lives in the part of the brain that has not changed since we were animals hiding in the dark from things we could not name, that part of me knew. There was an evening in mid-October when I came back from the library and found the apartment absolutely freezing. Every window was open, and it was 40 degrees outside. Danny was seated on the couch, wearing only a t-shirt, completely unbothered by the cold. I asked him why the windows were open.
he looked at me and said, very quietly, "It needed air." Not I needed air. It. I closed the windows. I said nothing. I sat down across from him and I studied his face for a long time. And he let me. He just sat there and let me look. And the longer I looked, the more certain I became that something behind those eyes was looking back at me. Something that was not Danny. Something that had put Danny on like a coat and was now seeing what it could get away with. That night, I could not sleep. I lay in my bed listening to the sounds of the apartment, the creak of the old building settling, the distant traffic on the street below. And then, around 3 in the morning, I heard footsteps in the hallway outside my room. Slow, deliberate footsteps that stopped directly outside my room and stayed there for what felt like 4 or 5 minutes, just standing. I did not move. I did not breathe. I lay in absolute stillness with my heart beating so hard I could feel it in my throat. And then the footsteps moved away, slowly, back toward Danny's room, and a door clicked shut. I did not sleep again that night. I did not sleep properly for many nights after that.
I went to the university library the following day, and I started reading. I know how that sounds. A literature student trying to research something real using books. But I did not know what else to do. I could not call a doctor and say, "My friend is being too quiet and it frightens me." I could not call the police. I had nothing but a feeling and a pair of eyes that had seen too much. What I found, buried in old European folklore texts, in accounts from rural Germany and the British Isles, in testimonies from people long dead who had been called superstitious, called mad, called worse, was a description of something that had no single name but carried a consistent signature across every culture that had ever encountered it. It moved between people. It watched through eyes that were not its own. It tested its host slowly, carefully, the way a man tries on a suit before buying it, and once it was certain of its fit, it stopped pretending. I came home that evening determined to speak to Danny directly, to say something, anything, just to make contact with whatever was left of him underneath what I had been seeing. I found him in the kitchen cooking pasta, humming softly, completely normal. And for one beautiful moment, I thought I had invented the whole thing. I thought I was the one losing my mind. He set 2 plates on the table and sat across from me and said, very casually, without looking up, "You went to the library today." I had told no one where I was going. I had told no one anything. I said yes. He nodded slowly, and then he looked up at me. And I want you to understand, I want you to really understand what I mean when I say that what looked at me from across that table was not my friend. It wore his face perfectly. It had memorized every detail. But there was something in the quality of the attention, something too still, too complete, too ancient, like being watched by something that has been waiting a very long time and is not in any hurry. It smiled at me and said, "You should eat. The food will get cold." I ate, because I did not know what else to do, because sometimes the most frightening thing a person can face is something that acts perfectly normal while you are screaming on the inside. Danny disappeared 3 days later. He left no note, took nothing with him. His wallet, his coat, his keys were all still in the apartment. The police investigated and found nothing. He was listed as a missing person for 11 years before the case was quietly closed. I never saw him again. But I will tell you this, and then I am done for tonight. I will tell you this one last thing, and then you must let an old man rest. About 6 months after Danny vanished, I was at a gas station just outside of Pittsburgh. It was early morning, barely light, and a man pumping gas at the next pump turned and looked at me. He was a stranger, 40 years old maybe, someone I had never seen in my life. And he smiled at me, with Danny's smile. And then he got in his car and drove away. Sleep well, child. Sleep well.